Welcome in, Big Blue Nation, to episode 2 of the Cats Talk podcast. Your Kentucky Wildcats win 31-0 over the Southern Mississippi Golden Eagles in what was a wild week 1, to say the latest. I am your host, Cameron Johnston. This is your host, Tyler Britton. Tyler, break down some of those time events on what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, what a emotionally filled weekend here. We got so many things going on. You got a 2-hour delay to start the game. People were getting ready for our game at 8 o'clock, and boy, were they disappointed when they had to wait until 10. But Big Blue Nation, you guys came out. You guys came and supported. We appreciate that as Cats fans here. So looking forward to a good season here. One of the things I found, I was listening to Mark Stoops talk after the game, and one of the things he found to be very important for the team is he prepared for this, getting ready for through the week. He said there was a chance that there was a possibility might be some delays, some weather inclinations here. I think he did a good job of getting this team together to be prepared for this moment. Obviously, Southern Miss not as prepared. You can kind of see that they tried to do too much too early. Seemed like their energy was down pretty quick. We'll get into some of the details on the stats here in a second, but glad to see that the Cats came through and did what they could for the 3 quarters of play that they had. So, Cam, go ahead and talk about your side of the story. What do you think happened at the game here? What were your pre-game thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, weather all week. We knew this was it was supposed to be lightning, chances of delays the whole time. We were hoping it wasn't going to be a 2-hour delay. I've heard very frustrated fans that were in attendance. They couldn't get into the stadium for a while once they finally got in. They were allowed to sit in the aluminum and metal bleachers during the lightning, but they were not allowed to partake in drinking beer before the game or any sort of alcohol. So I've heard some very frustrated fans on that aspect. But just keeping it football related, Kentucky came out, 10:05 start time. You can't think of a weirder way to start the game. I mean, Brock Vandagriff, his first college start, he comes out ready to play. He told media that he wasn't going to be able to sleep before the games. He was going to be so amped up, ready to go. And then he doesn't end up getting to play until 10:05. I think he saw some of those jitters to start the game. I mean, this Kentucky team, resiliency is kind of what was shown week 1. They only had a 10-minute halftime as opposed to your normal 30-minute halftime. There were so many things that were weird about this start to the game. You only get to watch 2 quarters and 5 minutes of football. You would have loved to have seen more because you wanted to see more from Brock Vandagriff. You only saw, he had 18 pass attempts. You saw him get to run the ball a little bit. Really, the only thing week 1 did was it left me wanting more. Is what week 1 did. I only got to watch not even 2.5 quarters of Kentucky football this weekend, and it just wasn't enough.
Yeah, well, hopefully throughout the season we'll get 4 quarters of football, maybe some overtime games. As long as we get victories at the end, I don't mind. But let's break down this game. You mentioned Brock's first game, Kentucky Wildcats football, slow start. Let's talk about the first quarter here. I saw Brock go up and down the field here a little bit. The team, offense, defense, had its ups, had its downs. I watched the team. It seemed like Brock kind of started off a little like he was getting used to the moment for a second. He had some good plays. He was running the ball a little bit, which is great. I thought he tried to force that ball in that ended up getting tipped and then picked. But it seemed like he turned it around in the second quarter. But what were your thoughts for the first quarter on the offense? What were your first quarter thoughts on the defense?
Yeah, just sticking with Brock in general, because that's going to be the main talking point that everybody's going to want to hear. You could definitely see that, not necessarily the rust, but just the jitters, the anxiety that he kind of had starting, waiting 2 hours after the delay. He's been waiting 2.5 years for this moment. Finally gets to start. I love that you kind of got that a little bit of like the Will Levis version of him, where you saw that he can run the ball, where he's not just a stationary mobile quarterback, where we kind of had in that Devin Leary last year. But he can't keep continuing to take those hits. I don't know if you saw some of those hits. Those were big hits. And against Southern Miss, you might get away with some of those hits. But Georgia linebackers are going to hit you a lot harder. And you might not be popping up from some of those. So I love to be able to see that he's got that in the arsenal. But I don't want to see him taking those kind of hits. I think you started to see that towards the end of the game, or end of the third quarter, since we didn't get the full 4 quarters. You saw him, start to wisen up a little bit and, kind of start to avoid the big hit a little bit, slide in certain occasions. But, as a runner, you saw what Bush Hamden was talking about all offseason, that he is an athlete and that they're going to make sure they utilize him in that run game. So it was good to see that part. Now, just him throwing the ball, I was a little unimpressed with the deep ball personally. You heard all offseason how he's got a rocket arm. You've heard, it lives up to the 5-star billing. I think he had some underthrows. That deep pass that he connected on Jamari Macklin. I know even in the post-game press conference, he said, he just wanted to throw it out there just to make sure that Jamari had caught it because he had 2 to 3 steps of separation. But hopefully he gets to a point where he feels comfortable making that throw, so it's a touchdown instead of a 40-something yard catch. Those are going to be the plays that in the red zone against Southern Miss, you're more than likely going to be able to capitalize on those plays. You're going to be able to score on stuff like that. But against Georgia, against, South Carolina, other SEC teams, you need to connect on that deep ball. You need to hit him in stride to where he can, just take it to the house for 6. Other than that, Gerald Mincy at right tackle, I was pretty underwhelmed with his start to the season. Gave up a good amount of pressures. Southern Miss's defense line is actually pretty good. It is. It's not quite SEC level, but it's not what you would think for the rest of the Southern Miss team. He gave up some pressures. I liked Brock's pocket presence. You saw him move up in the pocket, step left, step right, roll out. Some of those, carries that he had, they were not designed runs. It was just him being able to get on the move, make a play. Darian Brown's first touchdown pass, that's what it was. It was a broken play. Gerald Mincy had allowed a pressure. Brock rolls out, hits Darian Brown by the front pylon. So it's good to see that. You just see, that athleticism play through week 1. Like I said, would have loved to have seen a lot more of it. But at the least, we got that first little taste of what Brock can do in this Bush Hamden offense.
Yeah, I think it's important for teams going into the first game of the year to get some of those jitters out. You go an entire offseason, you're preparing for what you're scripting out, for first drive, second drive, maybe. You're going through all these plays and, of course, when you're practicing against your own defense, eventually it just becomes repetitive. You know how to play each other very well. But when you go to face that first team live and in action, it's the first time that you guys, the crowd's watching, the cameras are rolling. We forget these are kids out there. So I think it was important for him to go out there. Brock I thought he played pretty well. And again, I think he started off a little bit slow. I think the team did in general. The defense, came through, which is great. Both offenses, I think Southern Miss and Kentucky's offense both started off a little sluggish. Again, those pregame jitters, I feel like defenses always start off decent. But Brock definitely felt like he got comfortable quickly. Second quarter, he started taking off. He started throwing a couple tutties, which was nice to see. Driving the field, moving the ball. I do agree. I think him slowing down a little bit could help him longevity-wise. You're going to go against Georgia. You're not going to squeeze through those tiny holes the same way. It's going to turn into roadblocks. So, I think if he can slow down, I think he could have a good year this year. Might be competitive against some of these bigger teams in the SEC. Another great thing about Brock was I think he was effective in the run game as well. He was second on the team in rushing. He had 5 carries for 35 yards. He averaged 7 yards a carry. Demi also ran the ball 8 times, 59 yards, 77.4 yards a carry and a tutty. 22 was the longest on the day. I think there's opportunities where we can have some more breakout runs. Almost everybody who ran the ball got about 10 yards running at one point or another. So I'm excited to see what we can do throughout the longevity of the season. Cam, why don't you talk about your thoughts with the run game?
Yeah, this run game, usually you see an SEC opponent go up against one of these smaller schools. That's usually how they win these ball games. They just run the ball up and down the field, break off big chunk play after chunk play. I think we wanted to come out and establish the run game, which I think we did, and we did it somewhat effective. You still left a little room to be desired. 7.4 yards a carry for Demi. It's good, but that's not going to translate over to the SEC defenses. Like we previously said, the Southern Miss defense line is actually pretty good, but their linebackers are a weakness for them. So I would have loved to have seen more explosiveness. But I did love Jason Patterson, the way he ran when he got the ball as a true freshman. His first taste of college football, he ran angry and he ran fast. He was decisive. It was great to see. Jamarion Wilcox really didn't get too much involved, got a couple carries, so lived up to what the depth chart had released. Still have not heard any news yet on Chip Trainum, whether he is going to be available for the South Carolina game. I would lean no as of now. So we're still looking for Demi and Jason to be those two backfield guys. And we saw a lot of jet sweeps. Barry and Brown had a couple jet sweeps, jet touch pass, which, Tom, that jet touch pass on college football, it's effective all the time. All the time. That's 6 points waiting to happen. That's how it happened for Barry and Brown this week. That's how we got his second touchdown of the game. So it's good to see them trying to find ways to get the ball in Barry's hands. He's an effective playmaker. Getting the ball in his hands as much as possible, it's never a bad thing. And then, that's really all I've got to say about that running game. Running game, it was solid, effective, left you a little bit more to be desired, though.
Yeah, I think they got guts. They run up the middle. They can bulldoze a couple times. So it seemed like every time they touched the ball, they were powering through. I remember watching a game a few years back, and I think it was Illinois with Rashard Mendenhall back in the day. And it just seemed like the Ohio State Buckeyes could never stop them. It was really ticking me off watching that game because Rashard Mendenhall was just falling 5 yards each time. That's what I was thinking about when I was watching this game. Same thing. These guys were just falling 5 yards at a time. It was good to see. I think the same thing with the jet sweeps. If we can get the right tackle, make sure they can steal the edge. They'll make sure to get more runs on the side there. I think that playing some of the bigger games against Georgia, Southern Miss, some of the other bigger SEC teams that are going to be competitive this year, if they can get that sweep game going, that'll open things up in the middle, continue to get those runs up the middle. 7 yards a carry is great against teams like this, but against those tougher teams, I would say you're gonna have to cut those in half almost to have realistic expectations. So I think we're good there. Receivers, I thought they played pretty decent, all things considered. It was first game for them as well. They had some big catches. They had some big average yards per catch. Brown had 2 touchdown receptions. What did you see on the receiver side?
Yeah, you could tell they wanted to get Jamori Macklin involved, which we were wanting to see if it was going to be kind of like the Dane Key and Barry and Brown shows. Those were the returners and both effective last year. But they got Jamori involved early to start the game. He caught that deep pass for 48 yards from Brock, where if Brock hits him in stride, it's a touchdown and another 20 yards. Dane Key had 2 nice plays, really, on that little play-action crosser across the field that Brock hit him on. That was his most notable play of the game for 35 yards. Barry and Brown, while most of the time you expect him to be that explosive guy, only had 28 yards on 4 catches, and he did have a drop in there. We had talked in our previous show about how he's got to eliminate those concentration drops and how he's got to be able to – that's his biggest fault right now, is being able to – that was second and 8, and it would have been a 15 to 20-yard game. And with Berrien, who knows? Anytime you get the ball in his hands, he might take that for 6. He's got to be able to look those balls in and keep a hold of them. Other than that, Fred Frayer, they've been talking about him all offseason, and him getting involved shows you how much they have trust in him. And then Tucker Caddis, the tight end, was out. So Jordan Dingle, seeing him step up, he caught a touchdown pass. I'm sure the big dog, Vince Merrill, was very happy about that, seeing his tight ends get involved and get in that end zone. Jordan had a pretty nice touchdown celebration too. Nice little dance in the end zone. And that was a pretty good way to kind of cap off what we didn't know was going to be the end of the game, but it ended up being the end of the game as Southern Miss decided to just fold away their chance at a win against an SEC opponent, which I could go on and on for, but for the sake of this program, I'm not going to go into how you just allow your team to forfeit with 25 minutes left to play. It's a topic for another day, but
let's say, we watched the game. There was 3 phases to it. We saw the beginning where it seemed like the offense was trying to click, but it was like the first drive of the year, and they couldn't. They obviously turned the ball over. In the second quarter, they started to pick up pace. They started getting the points. The third quarter, they ended with the touchdown. Given the fourth quarter, do we see the strides keep going that way? Do we see like a 52-0 game, or do we see them kind of capping out? Do they start relaxing? What do you think Mark Stoops was going to be doing for the fourth quarter here?
Yeah, well, at a certain point, you probably want to get those guys off the field because you don't want injury risk, especially with the game coming up next week against South Carolina. So at some point, those guys were going to get off the field. They were going to start to put in the backups. But just for Brock, you want him to be comfortable. You wanted him to play a lot of that game. And also defensively, we made made huge plays defensively. You wanted to see we were getting them to third downs and we are getting them to long third downs. But I mean, their biggest plays of the game where they were converting on 3rd and 16, where they had a 24-yard reception with some broken tackles. Week 1, you can always expect, the tackling not to be its finest because you're usually not going head to head like that all off season. That was probably the biggest problem defensively to start the year. But I mean, this team, it's hard to predict what they were going to do the rest of that game. I mean, it looked like this offense was really starting to click and really start to get going. So I'd love to say that they were just going to, like you said, have this game end up 52-0. But like you saw, Southern Miss was pulling out all the stops. They ran 2 flea flickers, a fake punt. They were going to try and get a score on the board. They didn't, and they were fine with calling it a game. So I guess that kind of speaks to what their program is at the moment.
Well, why don't we head over to the defensive side here? Tell me about what you saw on defense for the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah, I mean, what a start for Jamin Dumas-Johnson. I mean, your first game as a Kentucky Wildcat, you come out there, you get a tip pass and you intercept it as well. I mean, what a way to, pronounce yourself to this fan base that's kind of been talking about you all off season. That and then Derek Jackson making a great play, tipping the ball up, Alex Afari, or my bad, JQ Hardaway making the interception in the end zone, kind of stopping what was Southern Miss's best drive, as you had alluded to earlier in the day. It's kind of crazy to see that, Deion Walker, the guy that we've been talking about all off season, really didn't make too much of an impact in this game. He actually finished the game with 0 tackles in this game. Granted, he was getting like double and triple team most of the entire game, which kind of helps that. But then again, he only had 20 or 35 minutes of football. So it's weird to see that. You saw, the pressure get after. You saw J.J. Weaver with the sack. You saw Trayvon Ripka with the sack. So, I mean, just like guys you expected to step up, guys you expected to be integral parts of this defense, like Zion Childress leading the team in tackles, Derek Jackson with that tip to lead to the JQ Hardaway interception, Jamin Dumas-Johnson with the interception. I mean, it's really exactly what you expected them to come out and do, was to come out. I wasn't expecting a shutout by any means. Shutting out anybody's hard. So was very, very pleased by that. Would they have done that if it was 4 quarters? I'm not sure. I'd love to say yes, and hopefully we can kind of keep this. Let's keep teams with 0 points for as long as we can. Hopefully we get through South Carolina with 0 points scored on our defense as well.
Yeah, listen, I think if this was Georgia or Texas or Ole Miss or someone who has some sort of good offense playing us, I'm sure people are looking back at this game and saying, oh yeah, there have been points on the board. But being that Southern Miss, the game ended at the third quarter. Come week 8, 9, 10 of the season, people aren't going to be talking about the Southern Miss game anymore. They're going to see the score 31-0. They're going to say, good job, Kentucky Wildcats. They're going to move forward. Look, I know it's only essentially a little over a half of football, but I want to read the stats here. I mean, this is incredible. They were averaged. They only allowed 131 yards for the entire. We'll call it the first half here. They only allowed 131 yards through the during the course of the game. 126 of those were passing, only 5 rushing. They had the ball multiple times. They just couldn't. The Southern Miss could not run the ball against this defense. They averaged. They ran the ball 12 times. They averaged less than half a yard per carry. That has to mean something. I know this is a Mark Stoops defense. I mean, this is Kentucky football here, but it doesn't matter who you're playing. If you're averaging half a yard, we'll double it for Georgia, right? I mean, that's 1 yard to carry. I know Georgia will probably end up having more, but that's pretty good. We can do that for most of the year. We're going to be competitive for most of the year here. I think that was something we talked about in our last podcast about how if the Russian defense can play just a tad bit better, the passing defense can play just a tad better, this team's going to be set up for success. I think week 1, all things considered, I know it's only 2.5 quarters here, but I think the defense is set up for success here for the longevity of it. So excited to do with that. Kept the offense out of the end zone. I think that's really key. Anytime you're gonna win a game, more opportunities for your offense to go in the end zone, less opportunities for the defense or for the opposing team to get in the end zone, and you guys will win a game. So excited to see what we can do there. Anything else that you want to add to the defense?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of reiterating what you said. Letting them average a half a yard per carry. Those are video game numbers, really. Deion Walker's got a lot to do with that, occupying 2 to 3 bodies per play. having two all SEC linebackers in De'Aaron Johnson and Jamin Dumas Johnson has a lot to do with that as well. Really, what you need is just somebody outside of those three in the front seven to step up. That way, they can't double and triple team Deion Walker. They can't make sure that their guards are flying to the next level to get onto the linebackers. So that's why, it's really nice to see Trayvon Ripka get a sack. It's really nice to see Keyshawn Silver have a tackle for loss. It's good to see guys like that step up in this week one matchup because we're going to need a lot from them. Like we talked about previously, playing SEC football, it's a long season. Guys get hurt, guys get banged up, so you need depth across that defensive line. And seeing that this week, seeing those guys step up, help out that linebacking core, gives you a little bit of confidence, even though this was a Southern Miss team that you don't expect to do much this season. So it was very, very pleasant to see.
Yeah, Cam, I couldn't agree with you anymore. I mean, the Kentucky Wildcats only got 2.5 quarters of football here. I think four full quarters here. We'll see what they can do. But you know who got all 4 quarters? Is next week's opponent, the Gamecocks here, South Carolina. They end up beating the Old Dominion here, 23-19. Close battle down to the wire here. They went into the fourth quarter tied 16-all. So very interested to see what we can do against South Carolina. They averaged, they got, like I said, 23 points. They got 288 total yards, 114 yards passing to 174 yards rushing. So run dominant defense. We'll go with Lenore Sellers here. Subpar play, I think, for a quarterback of his caliber. I think he should have been putting up more, especially against an Old Dominion team. We'll see what we can go in there and do against them. But Cam, what are your thoughts of our team going into, or South Carolina rather, coming over to Kroger Field playing us next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think South Carolina has to be. They had 79,000 fans in attendance for that game. I can't imagine many of them went home happy or feeling good about their offense or the team in general after that week one win against Old Dominion. Lenore Sellers, he was a 4-star recruit. They had been hyping him up all offseason. You had heard he's this dual threat. I actually saw a play where he actually ended up tackling his own running back at some point during this game, trying to throw a block for him, ended up tripping him up. So, I mean, it seems like he couldn't get out of his own way. He went 10 for 23 for 114 yards against an Old Dominion defense. So while, me and you might not have been all that pleased or not as excited as Brock Vandergrift's performance, he was still light years above what Lenore Sellers did. So I think it gives you a lot of confidence them coming into Kroger Field on Saturday this week. This was supposed to be South Carolina was supposed to have a down year this year, but usually, that's always a good game, Kentucky, South Carolina. I feel very confident after watching them play against Old Dominion and watching how we played against Southern Miss. I feel very confident in that game and that Kentucky can come home with a win.
I will say this, Lenore Sellers, even though I don't think he had the greatest game passing the ball with all the hype he had, he did rush the ball for 68 yards. He carried it 22 times. His longest being 23 yards. He had a touchdown for the day. Definitely not someone you want to sleep in. I think our front seven here really needs to make sure they do some film study. I mean, let's say the guy landed his block instead of tackling his own guy. That run goes for a little bit longer. The defense really needs to step up, and make sure they stop this run game. I think if we can trap this run game coming into Kroger Field, I think they have a shot. If they have to make Norris Sellers here throw the ball all over the place, I don't know if he's going to be prepared for an SEC defense like he was against Old Dominion. So we'll see what they can do there.
Yeah, but like you said, that'll be the biggest key. Raheem Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers. It's supposed to be kind of like how Baltimore has right now with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. It's supposed to be that mobile quarterback with a very downhill running back. That's what this is supposed to be like. This is what South Carolina fans want it to be like. So you're going to have big games from Trayvon Ripka, Deion Walker, Octavius Oxidine, guys on the edge, being able to seal that edge, making sure you seal that edge, making sure that you're sitting there watching the ball carrier, making sure, everybody's doing your job, staying in your gap. Miss one assignment, and like you said, Lenore Sellers, he's got wheels. Right now, he might not be able to throw the ball from me to you and make a completion right now, but he can still run the ball. He's still got juice there. And Rocket Sanders, I mean, the guy's pretty good. I mean, he had 92 yards last week. Granted, 24 carries to get 92 yards against Old Dominion's not the best, but that'll be where we have to watch the most. And they do still have Nick Harbor, who it looks like, I'm not sure if he was available this game, but he's got electric speed, so you'll have to watch for him over the top. But with Max Hairston out there and the way J.Q. Hardaway played week one, like I said, I'm feeling confident. If we trap that running game is the only pause for concern, like you mentioned.
Do you think that, I mean, I don't know much about Old Dominion here, but what they're supposed to do expectation-wise, but I would think that South Carolina's defense should have held them to less points than they were on the board. I know it's 19, but I feel like it's still a high-scoring game for what I was expecting from Old Dominion against South Carolina here. What are your thoughts with our defense going up against South Carolina? Or excuse me, what are our thoughts about our offense going up against South Carolina's defense?
Yeah, I mean, 19 points it's not a bad thing. If they went through the whole season averaging 19 points a game, their defense giving up 19 points a game, they would be happy about that. So I'm not as confident about the offense going against the defense as I am the other way around. But like you said, they did force 2 turnovers, 2 fumbles, their defense did. So if anything, Mark Stoops and Bush Hansen just got to be preaching, ball security. They found a way to get 2 balls out this week. So just, staying downhill, staying with that run game, keeping 2 hands on the ball, I think you'll find a way to get points against this defense. And really, I think it just comes down to, offense is going to do their thing. I don't think we're going to need to score, 28 or more points to win this game. I think honestly, whoever scores over 21 probably wins this game. I don't expect this being a shootout by any means. But like I said, we've also only seen 2.5 quarters of Kentucky football, so it's kind of premature for us to say we know what to expect from them. And then with South Carolina, it was Lenora Sellers' first start, Rocket Sanders' first start at South Carolina, so they're still working through kinks. Week 1 is such a weird time. You see Florida just got destroyed by Miami. I don't think there's that big of a talent gap between those 2 programs either. So it's a weird time to make declarative statements, but I think Kentucky will handle business this coming Saturday at Kroger Field.
I think they will too. South Carolina ran the ball 56 times, averaged 3.1 yards per carry there. So I think we can hold them right around there. I think our team's going to be competitive. I think our run game against South Carolina, I don't think it'll be as dominant as it was this past week, but I think it will still be pretty effective against the South Carolina defense. So I expect big things there. Cam, we'll wrap up on this. Let's go ahead and do our predictions. We already said that we're going to have Kentucky winning against South Carolina in our predictions to start the season. But what do you guys' final score here?
Yeah, I'm going to say Kentucky finds a way. I'll say they will score 31 points again this week, like they did last week against Southern Miss. I say they'll win this game 31-17. Kentucky wins by 2 scores.
I like the optimism there. I'm going to continue with the optimism. I was actually going to say 31 until you said 31. To be one better than you, I'm going to say 32. Somehow we're going to get it. I don't know how, but we're going to do it. 32 here, and I'm going to say Gamecocks get to, let's call it 24. 3 touchdowns and a field goal here for Gamecocks. I think they play a little bit better. I think Lenora Sellers comes out. One thing that I always found when I was playing is that just because you saw it one week, the team always seems to fix it for the next week there. So we'll see Lenora Sellers throw the ball a little bit better. He's going to have a couple touchdown passes. I think that the run game will get their rushing touchdown. Their kicker will get down the red zone and kick a field goal. But I think Kentucky Wildcats will handle business up in Kentucky. So, do you want to wrap things up?
Yeah, but like we were saying, Kentucky finally gets a nationally televised game. It's at SEC on ABC. They'll be kicking off at 3:30, playing the South Carolina Gamecocks. They open up as an 8.5-point favorite, so it looks like I have them covering. You do as well. This is a good time to be a Kentucky football fan. Not often do you get the ABC crews rolling into Lexington and Kroger Field. And there have been rumblings about Kentucky wins this game. There is a chance College Game Day could be coming to Lexington next week to watch that Georgia and Kentucky game as well. So you win this game, you take care of business like you should. You're looking at 2 back-to-back nationally televised games, and that's huge for this program.
Great. Well, Thank you guys so much for hopping on the podcast today. I hope you guys got some good information about this past week's game, what we have coming up for next week's game. Stay tuned. Once we finish up the game here next week, we'll be releasing another podcast. We'll be releasing one every single week, talking about what happened, what's going to happen, and so on. Come join us. Follow us on Instagram. Give us a like. Share with your friends. Go Cats.
Go Big Blue.